I'm just saying what I've been interested in is how do we bring these things back in ways that without technology, without electricity, without commodification or anything, where we just get together and and hold each other well for a sustained period of time, where those core technologies are actually being made use of, is it reweaves us back into a sense of being a people. Even if we're a bunch of strangers to begin with, we can grow so close to each other and feel so bonded through just the act of holding each other well.
Welcome to the Earth Mates podcast. Together, we explore how to find your path from climate anxiety to community action by asking, who are you? Because just like any relationship, that matters. So get ready to be raw and real, but also playful and silly with me, Chief Relationship Officer Amber Peoples, as we discover what's possible through the lens of the 5 Earth Archetypes. Curiosity and subscription buttons highly encouraged. Welcome, friends, to today's podcast. As we record this session, it is winter in the Northern Hemisphere. In fact, we've been getting quite the winter wonderland storm here where I live. And today, the ice has covered everything. It's dripping in icicles. It's turned parking lots into ice rinks. It is a place that you want to make sure you have extra traction on your shoes and your tires, or hopefully have the ability to snuggle in your nest at home. Wherever you are, perhaps you're in the Southern Hemisphere, or perhaps you're in the Northern Hemisphere, but listening to this 6 months down the road from now. Wherever you are, I'd like to encourage you to take this moment to experience the nature that's around you, the environment, the air that you're breathing, the light that might be coming through, the darkness that might be holding you. But I'm going to silently count to 5 in my head while you have that moment. Thank you. And now, I am delighted to introduce you to our special guest, Laurence Cole. Laurence and I met 12 years ago at the Northwest Permaculture Convergence. It was actually the start of my decade-long career working in events. Since then, Laurence and I have been in several song circles together, most of them led by him. In fact, every single person who takes the Earth Relationship Type quiz gets a recommendation for a song he has recorded. He is truly a master community song weaver and ritualist. Then, this past summer was especially meaningful for me. After leading a 30-minute-long song weaving with a 4-part harmony, Laurence referred to technologies of belonging and connection that go far beyond social media. I've been abuzz with this idea ever since, and that's why I'm so excited to chat with Laurence today. So welcome, Laurence. I'm so curious to hear what your version of that story might be.
Well, what I recall is, yes, we've seen each other multiple times over quite a stretch of time. And I've been leading songs at song gatherings for quite a number of years, around 15 years or so. And from early on in the first 4 or 5 years, I began seeing you on a regular basis. But I remember that we talked afterwards about your travels back to your ancestral homelands. And we talked about feeling back into a sense of knowing where, feeling in your bones, essentially, letting your bones be like tracking and homing devices that we have those phrases. I just knew it in my bones. And many people tell me when they go to an ancestral village or something that something actually awakens in them around a sense of being present where many generations have lived and have been perhaps buried there, so that somehow the connection uh, m- mysteriously allows you to have a sense that in your bones you're feeling like, oh, wow, I have a connection to this place that I maybe don't have anywhere else. And I would say this is a major part of the sensibility that I like us to explore is another kind of technology. That's one of the ways that the way we're made uh, from time immemorial, as it's sometimes put, hundreds of thousands of years. There are certain capacities that humans have known about that in many ways we just use as a figure of speech, but we don't really recognize it as something that's actually real, that is still alive in us. And because we're all so displaced in this regard, most of us are displaced from our ancestral home grounds. It's not something that necessarily comes up unless you actively and intentionally go back to that place. But I've known people who just didn't even know for sure and then found out by being in a place and having that sense and then checking on their lineage and their ancestry. Oh my God, yes, that was a true thing I felt. So I think when I'm just saying these things because um, belonging is in the ways that we lived for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years was a very critical part of our, you could say, our wiring, our, our, we could say, our continuum of expectations. That when we're born to feel like we're whole, and that what home is about our people and all our relations are noticing that we've arrived and are glad about it because we're seen as a new bundle of an elder in training carrying fully loaded with this particular quality of medicine that it will be our job to welcome and unfold in a process of rites of passage and a much more comprehensive sense of the people uh, have received this blessing, and it's our job to bring it forward through uh, the ways that we lead out the identity of a completely unique being through. It's not something you put in them. It's that you learn technologies of welcome, belonging, connection that help them come forward into their unique presence. And then that ripens over a whole lifetime to the good of the community and to the good of the person, of course. And when that doesn't happen, it's a very primal wound. One of my teachers used that phrase, the primal wound is the break in belonging. And so most healing is not about just healing the individual as if they were an isolated entity. It's about true healing is about a kind of wholeness, which is the root of the word healing, and is wholeness, and it's being part of a whole that you are a unique and absolutely critical part of a whole that works together as a people. James Hillman, the uh, well-known people worker and a psychotherapist and writer, uh, said through his exploration in these routes, he said, among people who know these things, the self is not in community, it is community. And so you know yourself as an integral part of a pupil. And that's what was the reality for, as I say, time immemorial. And modern life has pretty much led us into uh, so much displacement and homelessness in terms of those kind of awarenesses. And that it's there's so much that is lost from that sense of security and safety and belonging with your all your relations and the wisdom uh, of place that has been gathered over countless generations. The learning that indigenous people speak to about learning from the plants and learning from the animals as their teacher, that nature was uh, the great teacher, that that's where you went. You didn't have libraries or class, school, sitting in rows somewhere in a building to learn how to earn a living someday, or at least behave yourself while sitting in rows. Um, you went out in nature often on your own and came back and felt yourself having been witnessed and welcomed there and taught basic understandings and developing the capacity to communicate. Anyway, in other words, how to deeply listen. Those are all technologies of connection and belonging. But I have a teacher that who grew up in such an ancient culture that she spoke to the four healing salves, which are singing, dancing, storytelling, and silence. And she said, your well-being unravels wherever you became uncomfortable with any one of those things, whether someone shamed you into thinking that you can't sing because they were expecting more of you than your age appropriateness was able to produce, or um, awkwardness in cat got your tongue or whatever it is, that didn't allow you to just be at ease in your silence or um, in your movement, in your dance. These are all areas of profound shame and can be wounded. Uh, and then if we don't find our way back to a communal capacity to hold those things well, and which have often happen as a collective process in some form of ritual or another that everyone engages in and everyone supports everyone. It's not performance, it's not something commodified, it is something that's your birthright to be part of. And when you engage in these things in a communal way where everyone supports each other in the expression of our song, of our movement, of our capacity to tell good stories, not just stories of ancient wisdom, but the stories of your life, and have them of what's really happening, what's true for you, to be that honesty and telling the truth was, a side effect of stories that heal, stories that weave us back into if there's any slippage. So there's all these truths that are just built into the capacities that we carry into the world as we're born, our voices, our ears, our hearts, our feeling realm, and our capacity for awe and wonder. That is, and all of those things are magnified and anchored through doing them together. So doing them with your relation, with your people. And of course, even many languages and the original languages often have the sounds of the landscape and the animals of the place where your people were given life. And so uh, it's you mirror and get mirrored back, and in the ways that you express. This is traditionally. So I'm just saying what I've been interested in is how do we bring these things back in ways that without technology, without electricity, without commodification or anything, where we just get together and and hold each other well for a sustained period of time, where those four technologies are actually being made use of, is it reweaves us back into a sense of being a people. Even if we're a bunch of strangers to begin with, we can grow so close to each other and feel so bonded through just the act of holding each other well through a sustained ritual that includes all these things. So that's what inspires me, drew me to doing the kind of uh, circles of singing, and particularly for holding rituals for the tending of grief, which I always say is my idea of a good time, because it involves all these things and ends in such a place of connectedness and a sense of art of belonging to a group of people who fiercely love each other. And so,
Yeah, thank you so much, Lawrence. There's so much juiciness there, that it's and there's this beautiful cadence to the way that you speak of it that almost puts my body into this state where it can really receive it in a way that almost in some ways bypasses kind of some of that executive functional and prefrontal cortex, the part of me that judges and dissects and takes apart and allows me to be an interviewer, kind of speak at this moment. And so I just want to honor that way that you embody what it is that you're saying, because I feel it as you're speaking of it. And for you listening, I really hope that came across as well too, is this sense of you could listen to this podcast many times over and get something slightly different out of it, because it'll resonate with your body in a different way each time. And so I think that there was just so much in that 15 minutes of sharing that you just had with us, Lawrence. And as I try to imagine where to steer it next, there's so many different places. And I think one of them that is a question that I often have is understanding that we do, and especially in the United States and a lot of westernized, industrialized nations, the overarching culture does have a disconnect with what it is that you're speaking about. And and it is interesting to me to consider ways that we can incorporate that in a way that is true and authentic, and that also kind of allows us to take the baby steps perhaps that we need to get there, and how that may or may not look different in countries and communities and regions where this is more the norm. This is daily life.
mm, well, I think when you live in a more or less state of nature, where you don't have all the technologies from extractive industries and so on that allow us to, you know, operate with power differentials in every context, whether it's entertainment or travel or whatever. Um, there's there's a capacity for holding witness, and this is when we gather in ritual. It's really the remembrance that, and the recognition that things do get more disconnected and more fragile. And before the fragility leads to a breakage, where, there's a line from a beautiful poem by William Stafford where he says there's many a small betrayal in the mind, a shrug that lets the fragile sequence break, sending, and it's rather than shrugging and saying, oh, well, whatever, let's move on. If we don't stop, and when the teachers that first came uh, to the West to teach grief ritual, Malodoma and Sabon Fusame, from Burkina Faso in Africa, West Africa. When I first read their material before I even met them, they said, well, doing grief ritual is the glue of community. In fact, we do rituals of all sorts, and it's how we keep reweaving the bonds of connection and belonging, essentially. So it's the glue of keep help because we need each other. That's the other thing about community. Through community, everyone's important, and we're not going to make it without everyone's medicine and everyone's care. It's how, and so it's living at that basic level, which has to be convivial. We have to live on a respected and respectful, even footing together as a people, and our people are even the more than human world, the tree people and the elk people and the beaver people and the eagle people and all of them, everything is alive. So you have the capacity to learn witnessing and to be witnessed. And when you say the silence involved in that, the a lot of the teachings of the great masters was hearkening back to, well, and particularly in the early Taoist teachings, there are times to be active, there's a time to be still, there are times to be coming forth with your yang energy, your outward energy, there are times to be empty and still, and to be receptive, to take in, and really let your own expression take a rest while you receive someone else's full reality. And you practice that in so many ways. There's so many practices that are part of holding sacred witness, holding the witness of another sacred being, or of any sort. Maybe it's a tree, maybe it is a beaver. But you attend to it in such a way that you're empty enough to receive its reality and to learn from that and to cherish that and to reflect it back in such a way that that other thing knows that you see them. And then when human beings do that, and when you feel witness, you feel a sense of belonging. And when you give witness, you feel a sense of belonging because the reality of being witnessed in that way brings such a sense of closeness and well-being to the person being witnessed. And then you feel their gladness and that warms you. And so you feel connected. But it can't happen if both people have things to say and are in their yang state, because when yang meets yang, it separates. It's like poles of the magnet. And so when there's an emptiness that receives and takes the form and shape, I call it, because it's like an enzyme. An enzyme doesn't actually change, doesn't interact chemically or any way with a substance. Substance is not nutritionally available, and so enzyme comes and forms the shape of it, while that substance can shift and become more available and then there's a separation, but there's also a sense of having been mirrored in a way that is nutritional in itself. I mean, I'm just using it as an analogy, but that's what I call that quality of listening. I call it enzymatic listening, because we just take the shape of another, but it takes practice and skill to learn to not try to force a change, but to just be with someone and trust that just by having your presence, your reality, witness, you will move through the change that takes you back into a sense of of closeness and connection, otherwise healed and not, it's not crazy making. It's like, oh, what's happening? I can be witnessed and I can go through it because someone is with me and they're not trying to fix me or think that they know better than my own internal wisdom or any of that. They're just trusting that I can move through this by just giving me that witness thing. And so that's a huge of part of the process of ritual is to provide opportunities for people to experience each other in that way. And it builds a sense of a container that then can hold through quite intensive times the the more and the kind of ritual that really welcomes really big feeling and really big motion and really big sound and the expression, and then finally finishing to a place of feeling cleansed and released and just relax back into your presence as a good thing in the world because you've been so witnessed and so supported through that time, through the kind of radical ritual that doesn't run on linear time. It just runs on what's really up and ready to move, and the sacred witnessing and welcoming for what someone needs to pass through to come back to a place of equilibrium and rest in their just the goodness of their own being. And so it's something that happens as a people and reweaves you back into community that can get up and do what needs to be done for each other in other ways. You know? And so those are those are the ways that when we first started doing this work with the folks from Africa, part of our prayer would be help us ancestors to learn how to be human beings again. And, because these are the natural ways for thousands and thousands of years, people who depended on each other to stay deeply and strongly and intuitively connected to the currents of life and the presence of the more than human relations and the spirit world and everything else. So, it's interesting. I heard a podcast recently. I think it was on the Emerald, where um, you know that we've been told. Well, I was anyway. I don't know. It seemed to be the thing, the mysterious thing that human beings had only used 10% of our brains.
Mm.
And I think, what's that about? You know, Oh, what's the rest of it? It just evolved all on its own as some sort of preemptive strike when we might need to be smarter at some point. And then just dumb ourselves down, and the rest of our brains are going, hey, remember me? You might want to activate some of this part and not be such terrible mistakes and ruining the place you live. Um, so anyway, you need help, and the help is available. But you can't perceive it. You're going to keep on doing stupid things, and so so the point is that there are ways to keep the intelligence. It's not just a localized intelligence. It's the main thing. The rest of the brain is for apprehending and receiving the intelligence of the universe and of the whole living world in ways that is not about dominion over, but learning to be a caring presence, holding sacred witness and holding sacred action for the sake of the well-being of all our relations. So I think I said.
Yeah, there was a lot. So it sounds like a lot of what you described is that setting of ritual, and that there is the day to day where there's perhaps different practices in these realms of feeling like you are more strongly tied in community versus a society where there's more issues around dominance, but perhaps the place where we can both meet and both benefit from are those moments of ritual where we are casting kind of a circle and a container for these moments to happen where we can truly witness, and we can truly experience, and we can have, you emphasize that there are certain, practices within that to make sure that that space is held in a way that purposefully moves that energy, or at least provides the setting for the best possible way for it to move. And I thought what was kind of interesting there within the sense of ritual was this element of reciprocity, because we've talked a lot about, you talked about your enzymes, you talked about dominance, you talked about belonging, and it seems like this place of reciprocity is really important. Not so much that it's, one for one and you're keeping tallies and sheets and things like that, but there is this sense of truly being curious about one another, truly listening to one another, truly um, giving when it feels like a genuine place to give from, or be able to be the one who receives support when it feels like the genuine time to do that. And we also talked about the more than human world in there as well, with the different plants and the animals and the elements. And I'm wondering, as you look at these frameworks that and these technologies of belonging connection, how do you interpret that sense of a reciprocal relationship?
It is the essence of the living world. So many teachers, certainly it's a a key part of the teaching from Robin Wall Kimmerer, the author of the book on moss and then the book on braiding sweetgrass, it's called. She, throughout the whole teachings of her people, the Potawatomi people and other peoples of that uh, a- ancient presence here on this continent, um, is the sense of all flourishing is mutual, and that uh, so that everything. I was once asked to write a song about this. Uh, that he said it just means that everything essentially is obligated to everything else for our lives. Everything lives in obligation is the words of the song. Everything everything lives in obligation to everything that lives. Everything lives in obligation to everything that lives. And there's the other layers to it. Everything no created is alive. There's harmonies and things. But the whole thing was, yes, and everything's alive. It's the animist. It's the animistic notion that everything has spirit, everything is part of a symbiosis of interwoven, uh, mutually flourishing, mutually supportive things, but that it is maintained through a sense of obligation and gratitude. So when we say, "Oh, obligation," I don't want to be obliged to anybody. I don't want to, sort of a dirty word in our culture. Um, the fact is, when you say much obliged, when you hear that, if someone says to you, "Oh, much obliged," and it's like there's a different atmosphere in the heart. You notice when just hearing that phrase, the difference that you feel, and so it means that what you've offered me, I will either pass along and offer to the next person in a similar need, or if you have an issue or a concern or you need some help in some way, I'm going to be there for you for sure. I'm on the case with you right away. And so, and it's It's just built in. That's what we're here for, is to make sure that we bear witness. Oh, okay. What I have more than I need. Pass it along. Whatever I have, you have, and we share.
Yeah, so this idea that has kind of been interwoven throughout our and conversation so far is this in this last little section you talked about we need each other, you talked about being much obliged, you talked about listening and witnessing. um, there were so many interwoven parts, and I would like to take us kind of back to these specifics of the technologies of belonging connection, which once again were song and dance and story and silence. And in the intro, I talked a lot about our interwoven stories and history of song together, and you gave us a sweet little taste of a song that fit in so perfectly into what you were speaking. Work in the world of musicals sometimes, and we often joke about how what it would be like to live a life where you just broke out in song because you were called to. And most people really laugh at that. And I love that it is truly a part of who you are, Lawrence, on a day-to-day basis, is that there's these moments that you know that there's something that is expressed in a different way and a more articulate way and a more connected way through song. And so I'd love to have you talk a little bit more about how you see song, whether that's through harmonies or through the ritual of song, or whatever way that you think that song really is this technology of belonging and connection.
My teacher, Angela Arian, who spoke of these healing salves, she was a Basque woman, I think I may have mentioned. Anyway, she says that every child sings. I mean, if you go, I've heard it said, you go into a school, to preschool or a kindergarten, and you say, okay, who loves to sing here? Who's a good singer? And all the hands go up. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. And, by the second grade, there's a few hands going up. By the fourth or fifth grade, maybe one or two. And because they're better than the other. And it's like, so shaming has already happened. And it's not that way. My daughter teaches and was the principal of the Quileute Tribal School out on the coast here in Washington. And when you go to the song night, the elders are drumming and singing the songs, and the little kids are right there, and they're learning the dances. And, this is all coming back. I mean, they're reclaiming their culture, and it's quite beautiful to see. But it's the joy and the connectivity that's present in the room with that happening, because nobody's being corrected, and they're just doing it, and they pick it up in the ways that they can, and then you can feel it progressing towards more cohesion, but it's just welcomed, and it's not a performance. It's just what we do together to remember who we are, and what we love to do is to express together power and meaning and beauty and cohesion, and staying in the rhythm together, and staying in the power of our voices blended. And yes, sometimes now, in some cultures, harmony has been more of a thing than in and some places it's more rhythmical subtlety. But it develops from inviting the kids or wearing your kids on your back, so that sense of belonging while someone is working and being, and at the same time seeing what part, their working partners, if they're pounding grain or whatever. It's a rhythmical thing up there. The rhythm and song in the midst of it, and the children are just riding along with it, and they're born into it, and just grow up into it as part of the way that you feel yourself in connection as a part of a powerful expression that fits with the business of living, fits in the midst of it in a beautiful way. And so when I say singing, it's yes, everyone has their favorite songs and their ways of singing, but it's the singing that happens in a collective where you here's how I put it. I say when we sing and we have a part, and it's so much easier to hold our part if we have a partner or partners in that to help us stay together in it. So a lot of the songs I teach or write and pass along are songs with layers in them, and you teach the parts separately, and people then stay together by with their partners, and the other part have their partners, and pretty soon, when all the partners in the different parts are uh, holding their places together, interwoven with the other parts, it becomes a partnership. And a ship is a vessel, and you go somewhere you can't go alone. It takes you to a quality of experience that's just impossible to just get on, even just singing alone. You can have a beautiful time singing alone. Not saying, I'm just saying that the technology of belonging essentially is the technology of people singing together. And this is as ancient, it may even predate speech. You know, it may be in the earliest. Some anthropologists think that's the singing reflex or whatever. It was just expressing powerful feeling and having people joining in, mirroring it, reflecting it, being with it. And so that you don't feel alone. You feel connected and your feelings are true and are held by others in a way. And the sounds of expression are carried together. And that's that sense of belonging. And it's the same when you're done and you feel the power of what's still vibrating in the atmosphere and you hold the silence of that lively energy that's also a bonding experience. A sense of, whoa, look what we did. We can still feel it. We feel that heightened aliveness and connectivity. Um, so it's those kinds of things that we do together that are what I call technologies of, and so the elements of, and a lot of times in like in grief ritual, we just have people hold that sacredness, and then when they're done, we don't reflect or anything. We just nod and say thank you because we stayed the course with you. And just that, when you're done, when they're finished and they give gratitude for what they experienced, both as a listener and as being listened to, it's so much sense of connection and belonging has happened just through holding silence for someone else's expression. But a lively silence that's compassionately curious about what is it like for you to be having your life experience right now in its deepest layers, and how can I just stay with you while you describe that? And then the potency of that is so delicious for people and so healing. I have another song that just says, attention is the healer of separation. Attention is the healer of separation. And you, of course, have to take a deep breath so you don't separate the syllables there. It's like, attention is the healer of separation. It's not going to work quite as well.
What was really beautiful about that, Lawrence, too, is you gave such a, part of my brain when I asked the question was expecting you to go into a direction that was very Western. It was, talk about the overtones and the harmonies and, what some of the studies done around singing is that our hearts and our breaths start, sinking. And that's something that we can measure in science. And all of that is true. And I love that you reminded us too of this more intuitive way of growing up with it, of its symbiotic nature with a felt sense of belonging. And even without any prompting, we the question was around singing, and you found your way eventually to silence, as if there was no, to use your words, separation between these two different technologies of belonging and connection. And I know me personally, a lot of times when I hear that rhythm, my body wants to respond. I want to bring in that dance element because that's what feels most natural to me. And so um, I think what's beautiful about these technologies is just like they are about belonging, they as a whole belong so well to each other. And so there's layers upon layers of that. And I just think that's so beautiful.
Yeah, in some African languages, for instance, the word for song is also the word for dance. I mean, they're interwoven, but that's what it is. And we're I think even in some languages, there isn't a different word for any of it. For people singing, dancing, it's like, that's what we are. We're singing, dancing things. So integral.
Well, as we come to near the end of our hour together, I would love to have you send us with a song.
Well, let's see. Hmm, I think, yeah, I think there's one I'm just thinking of. It was inspired by some words from Winona LaDuke,
Mm.
which is also kind of the essential theme of belongingness is you and I drink this water, you and I breathe this air. And then she said, you and I live here. So caring for the water, caring for the air, caring for each other. And I added another line just to remind us where we are on this holy ground that is this living earth. So the song goes,
Before we hear Lawrence's song, I want to let you know that his heartfelt 4-part harmony starts to blow out the mic. So I cut it right before the fourth rafter rising verse. You can hear a recorded version of You and I, along with many other songs, on his website, laurencecole.com. A link is in the show notes. And now, back to Lawrence.
you and I, and you hold out that long note because when the harmonies come in, it's lovely to just hold the tones and listen to the harmonies. But it goes, you and I drink this water. You and I breathe this air. You and I walk this holy ground. Oh, you and I live here. Then the next line is on you and I drink this water. You and I breathe this air. You and I walk this holy ground. You and I live here. Then I like to add they and we. So we start breaking down this othering. Drink this water. They and we. I'm going to sing another harmony. Then they and we walk this holy ground. They and we living, and all of us, oh yes.
Thank you, song. I know that's one of the things that we teach in song circles is at the end also to honor that silence at the end, and also to thank the song itself, the heartbeat of the song and its presence. And so thank you, song. And of course, many, many thanks to you, my friend Laurence. I am so honored and delighted and full of smiles in this moment for having you as a friend in my life. I feel so welcome.
Mm. Yeah, it's a true thing. Mm.
Mm.
Mm. Mm.
Hey, Earthmate. How did that episode resonate? Did it stretch you, inspire you, or perhaps irk you? I'm here for it, so please reach out. Besides the socials, we have a community to practice with on our website, eartharchetypes.com, where more Earth archetypes can guide your path and become dear friends. A great place to start is the quiz to discover your type. Oh, and on your way, I'd love for you to hit the subscribe button. See you again soon.